All right, so thank you for joining us today. We've got a little bit of an intro, so while people are still kind of filtering in, I'm just going to get started. I'm really thrilled to help introduce today's webinar speaker. We're focused on summer chum salmon and habitat recovery in Hood Canal, and it's presented by Scott Brewer of the Hood Canal Coordinating Council. My name is Rebecca Brown, and I work for the Department of Natural Resources, where I'm part of the National Estuary Program Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead Team, or Habitat SIL, or HSIL, a lot of ways to say that. And I support the land development and cover implementation strategy. Next slide, Scott. There we go. So we've got a few housekeeping notes. Today's webinar is being recorded. And then we're also planning on having time for questions at the end of the presentation. So when we get there, we'd like to have, especially with a smaller group, we'd like to be able to have more of a conversation. So if you, at that point, feel free to raise your hand, ask a question, turn your video on. You still can type a question in the chat if you're interested in that too. And then I'll be facilitating that conversation with Scott. And then if anyone's having technical issues, you can contact my colleague, Elizabeth Spalding, and her information is on the slide. Next slide. Okay. So as I mentioned, I worked for the Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead, which is an interagency team supporting the National Estuary Program, co-led by the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Washington Department of Natural Resources. Our focus is on advancing Puget Sound recovery through collaborative planning and strategic investments. We award grants of the Puget Sound Geographic Funds through a cooperative agreement with EPA in support of the Puget Sound Action Agenda and implementation strategies. One of the reasons this is an exciting program is because these dollars go towards traditionally difficult to fund activities and actions that catalyze greater opportunities for recovery. Okay, next slide, Scott. So today's project was recommended by our Habitat Strategic Initiative Advisory Team for funding in 2018 in support of the Floodplains and Estuaries Implementation Strategy and the 2018 to 2022 Puget Sound Action Agenda. It represents a long-standing continuation of the Habitat SIL's work to catalyze recovery actions for habitat and critical species by using the best available science, local knowledge, and partnerships to inform recovery plans. This project focuses on a very important species, which is endangered summer chum in the Hood Canal, and drills into the specific actions in watersheds, stream mouth estuaries, and the nearshore environment needed to achieve healthy and sustainable populations that will ultimately lead to recovery and delisting. You'll also hear from Scott about the use of the Landscape Assessment and Prioritization tool, or the LAP tool, to understand the compatibility and potential impacts of land use, which was also developed through the Habitat SIL funding in support of near-term actions. And we're hosting another webinar on January 9th, which will dive into that tool a bit more. And I'm going to drop that registration link, which is hot off the presses, into the chat. And even though the funded portion of Scott's project is coming to a close, we are very interested in the discussion today and continuing the conversation of how efforts like this can inform our regional recovery goals. And next slide, Scott. And then just a quick note that if you want more information on the Habitat SIL, please visit our webpage and you can subscribe to get updates. And then I look forward to this discussion today, and you can contact me if you have questions. And then with that, I'm going to introduce it to Scott Brewer. So take it away, Scott.
Hey, thank you, Rebecca, and thank you from everyone for joining in this afternoon. I think I can say this afternoon now, right? Yeah, it's afternoon. I'm Scott Brewer. I'm an executive director with Hood Canal Coordinating Council. For those of you that may not be that familiar with the Coordinating Council, I've got the logos of our 5 members up there: the Skokomish tribe, the Port Gamble Sklallam tribe, the Mason County, Jefferson County, and Kitsap County. All 5 of those are members. They're pretty much the land use authorities, if you will, in the Hood Canal and Eastern Strait of Juan de Fuca watershed. So this project is titled, we're looking at issues assessment, and I'm going to use the term issues and threats kind of interchangeably here. There was over the couple of years that we ran this, different terms kind of meaning the same thing. First of all, I just want to provide some acknowledgements. There's 2 people in particular, though, is Larry Listell with BioStream Environmental. He did a huge amount of the work that you're going to hear about today in this presentation, and has been working with me on summer chum salmon recovery for quite a while since we initially wrote the recovery plan that came out in 2005. And I've gotten to know Larry quite well and believe he does really great work. Also, I want to acknowledge Alicia Olivas, our salmon recovery program implementation manager at the Coordinating Council. She's part of our team that's helping do all the good things that we've been doing for summer chum. So let me start out. This slide shows there's 2 populations of summer chum. There's a Strait population and there's a Hood Canal population. We have several subpopulations within both the Hood Canal and within the Strait of Juan de Fuca, Eastern Strait of Juan de Fuca. But these are the 2 populations, the main ones that are recognized and where we need to meet the recovery recovery targets and recovery goals. I just wanted to show you this because we're feeling pretty positive about the trajectory right now with summer chum, what's going on. If you look at these slides, and I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but prior to the listing, which was in 1999, 2000, definitely in decline, certainly through the 80s, very, very low numbers in both Hood Canal and both the Strait and in Hood Canal. And then we start to see a rise after the listing. There was supplementation that took place, hatchery work where trying to jumpstart the various few of the different runs that are out there that either were extirpated or very, very low numbers. So for a while, you can see these yellow marks and these bars. That's the supplementation program. The supplementation program didn't last very long. It was 8 years, max 12 years in the quill scene, and then we shut it down because the idea is to get the run to if you will, jumpstart, regenerate, and get moving again. There is no supplementation going on right now, and like you can see, all these later years. We're not finding any other than natural origin fish is what they would call it. And I just wanted to give you a drill down to some of our subpopulations up in the Snow Salmon Creek and the Strait. You're seeing a similar kind of trend there, and the Union River down in the very end, south end of Hood Canal that way. So what we want to do that this project was able to help us a lot with, we want to do the assessment of what are the issues, assesses the issues, those threats and limiting factors of the various subpopulations throughout the Hood Canal summer chum ESA listed area, or it's also called the Evolutionary Significant Unit, or ESU. And that ESU geographic area it starts coming in from the north out in the Dungeness River. That's part of it, then all the way down into Hood Canal. So we wrote, like I mentioned, we wrote this plan back in 2005, and a lot of work has been done since then. What's the status right now? Because if indeed we believe we could be at recovery, I mean, that's to be determined, and we're trying to get a better handle on that. So what's still outstanding out there? What still needs to be fixed? What still needs to be addressed and taken a looked at? So to determine their status, determine the need for specific actions, and focus on those outstanding issues or threats, And then we want to achieve healthy, sustainable populations, because what we really want to do is not only recover, get these fish recovered, but to keep them there for in the future, into perpetuity that way. So what we were able to achieve with this funding for this project is we completed an update to our what's known as EDT, or the Ecosystem Diagnostic and Treatment Method. We originally did that for when the recovery plan was adopted back in 2005, and we've updated it now just this past year. There was other funding that helped contribute to this. We worked with Greg Blair at ICF and also Larry Listell, and all the technical work in that was done with that funding, but this funding provided for the write-up, the analysis of what all those numbers were saying. So there's quite a huge report that you'll be able to get a hold of, I believe. I don't know all the logistics of that, but that should be available through the sales, and if not, I can get that to you. But we have updated that. We've also updated our guidance about priorities for salmonid recovery actions, and we're taking a good hard look at the status of those threats. Again, what is still outstanding? What kind of actions are we needing to take care of those? So I'll explain a bit of this some more as we move on here. So EDT, real quick, for those of you who may not be that familiar, it's a habitat-based model. It's developed to estimate, the population performance measures. It looks at all the, wherever the fish are in their life history, what are those aquatic habitat, the characteristics of that aquatic habitat, freshwater, estuarine, and also in the sub-estuaries. This helps provide that assessment then of the effects of those factors on the performance in there. And that is something obviously we need to know. So we need to know where we're going with that. So we did a prioritization back in 2015. So about 7-8 years on now, we updated that with new information, new abundance and productivity information about summer chum, a better understanding of where things are at in the habitats and environments and the various watersheds that these critters occupy. I want to step back though a second and really make a point that prioritization is extremely important, and it needs to be done everywhere. I would suggest that for Puget Sound recovery, certainly for Puget Sound Chinook that way, but we have done this for all of the salmonid stocks in Hood Canal. And let me go through that. So we need prioritization because it's what actions you want to take. Money is limited, and we got to take into account all the societal values that come with a fish, come with salmon in particular. There's certainly the ESA listings listed as threatened there. There's the ecological interactions of different kinds. There's economic, cultural values derived by the different groups of people that live and work and play in these environments. So that the reality is that you need resources to restore and protect habitats, and those resources very much are limited. So how do we get the best bang for the dollar in that regard? This is how we make decisions. So looking at the current status right now of summer chum, the blue circle up here at the top is the Strait of Juan to Fuca. There's 4 subpopulations in there. The Dungeness is at the moment not robust, considered extirpated. However, we're starting work, or actually the Jamestown Sklallam tribe is starting work to do some reintroduction in Dungeness. They've done tons of work in Dungeness watershed to help recover Chinook salmon in that watershed. And we believe that summer chum can definitely benefit from that. And let's see, then you've got a Jimmy Come Lately and the snow salmon and Jimmy Come Lately runs going on up there, and then Chimicum Creek down here, which is which is now very robust. It was extirpated at one time, but when we got going with the recovery planning implementation, that has made some tremendous progress in that watershed. Down in Hood Canal, there's a few more that all these red dots are not doing well. They are originally there, but there is a good, here's the Union here, and there's a good smattering all around Hood Canal, if you will, of robust populations. One of the bigger concerns that we have right now is the spatial structure of this. Now we do have some fish here in Union. We would like to get another population or two on this east side, the west side of the Kitsap Peninsula, east side of Hood Canal that way. That's something we know is outstanding and we'll be working on there. So this prioritization approach that we took back in 2015, and now I've updated this using this funding, is that we looked at every salmon stock in the region and identified and prioritized for action using a defined set of scoring criteria. All the habitat related issues or threats are identified and they're scored for each of these stocks. And all potential actions relevant to each issue are identified and scored related to each salmon stock. Now, when I say actions, that's not a project. An action would be something like, hey, we need more large woody debris to provide rearing habitat in a particular system. A project would be, what are you gonna do? Like, I'm gonna put pieces of wood here in this part of the river. And that's the project to address the particular action that way. Just wanna make that clear about the difference between those two terms. We pulled together then a document, what we're calling a documented logic change that helps with what we're looking at, the hypothesis for proceeding with the different actions that were needed. And this kind of lays out the issue affecting each of the stocks, the relevance of that issue to the stock, the causes of the problem, the potential solutions, the actions then that would come out of what those solutions be. Objectives for the actions, like, yeah, if you put in more large woody debris, you're going to get better rearing and better productivity that way. And then try to lay out what the uncertainties are. And we did that for each of the stocks. The stock was defined as a species or run type produced in a watershed draining either into Hood Canal or the Eastern Strait. We looked at spring and fall Chinook, summer and fall Chum, coho, summer and winter steelhead, pink, sockeye, cutthroat, and char. 390 stocks were identified. So everything I mentioned up before, we did that for each one of these. We got rid of the cutthroat because they used up, we didn't get rid of, we just put them aside and not gonna pay attention to them at the moment. So 279 were excluded, from taking a more detailed analysis out of the 390 stocks total there that were identified. Here's a list of criteria that we use. This is that we did scoring for each one of these. And there are 10 criteria for each. And so each of these stocks, each of these salmonids got a score, and we added those up. It was on a scale from 0 to 4. The scores are summed using an algorithm resulting in ranked and grouped. And I'm going to run through now some slides that they're kind of those, PowerPoints from hell, if you will, a lot of words. So don't get too hung up on be able to read all that, because I would strongly urge you to go and get the report and see more detail about what this is. But just to give you a flavor, and this might be slightly blurry, this is the scoring criteria. So like the stock status, expected or known, comparable to, it got a score of 0 if it was similar, but if it's listed or not extirpated, then it would score a 4. So the higher the score, the higher the rank overall when all added up. And I'm just going to run through quick. We looked at stock status, hatchery contributions, or effects from hatcheries, certainty of knowledge about the status and limiting factors. It's just some of the stocks we just didn't know enough about. Others we know quite a bit about. So really high certainty on stocks, yeah, would get a higher score that way, for example. Certainty success with the focused actions. That was given a shot at it. Hey, if we did X, Y, and Z, what would be the success of that? And given what we know of the watershed, we looked at the abundance, we looked at diversity or structure, spatial structure, where are the fish spawning in that? We looked at the biological uniqueness of each of these. They have unique or rare life histories. They got a pretty high score. Ecological significance was also added in there. And then we also took a look at tribal cultural significance. If in this example, if it's a really high significance to tribal culture, it got a high score. Likewise, we went through non-tribal culture or social significance and looked at economic significance that way. So that's the rundown of the criteria. So here is the latest prioritization. Again, obviously it's a lot of lines, but each one of these this is Skokomish summer chum. That's the highest rated one, and we go down. This is the top 80 right here that you've got in front of you. Let me boil that down to the couple of the groups. Just looking at 21 stocks. These are going to be the ones that we're most likely will be focusing on. These are primarily summer chum. There's a steelhead or two in here as well, and a fall chinook. But we're going to be using this information in a major way to figure out, like I mentioned earlier, what should we be focusing on regarding what's still wrong, what's still outstanding that way. Again, one of those slides from the PowerPoint hell for you to take a look at. But I just want to point out, if you remember that arrow I had at the beginning or towards the beginning of this presentation, yeah, for each one of these areas, like this one is freshwater habitat, large stream floodplains. This would be, that example would be like, well, you can see down here, Dungeness, Quilcene, Skokomish, etc. We laid out what the issue is for each, what's the relevance to salmonids, like this says loss in floodplain function, etc. Took a look at, causes, solutions, and what actions they might be there of importance there. Then we scored these, and here's the issues, the scoring. So on a scale 0 to 4, and again, don't worry about reading all this, but know the darker little squares in here are 4s, and it goes down in the shades down to 0. But those with 4 are the ones we want to be focusing on in the particular case that we have an interest, or the stocks we have an interest of. Then we took a look at the actions as well that might be needed. And yeah, the 4s again, or the darker shade of green, are the ones that we're are going to rate highest and well, give us that suggest that's where the attention really ought to be. So what we tried to do is NOAA Fisheries, talking with them, and when they laid out, back when, if you will, when recovery plans are being written, what are the threats or the listing factors in there? So there's 5 that pertain to, primarily to summer chum, and I've got them listed here. The present or threatened destruction, modification, or curtailment of its range or habitat, overutilization of commercial recreation, harvest primarily, disease or predation, inadequacy of regulatory mechanisms, and other natural man-made factors affecting natural or man-made factors, affecting it, like climate change. Now, obviously, very broad, aren't they? But what we need to do, and what we're going to be doing, is we're going to update or revise the recovery plan for summer chum, and we're going to address how we believe each of these threats have been addressed, or have they not, or how they've not been addressed. And that's the beauty or the value of this threats assessment or issues assessment, is to get at that better understanding of what it is that still needs to be done, so we can address where we can let NOAA fish know where things are at in regards to, well, recovery and delisting that way. So right now we've come up with conclusions on for each, here's the main subpopulations of summer chum, Union, Tahuya, Skokomish on down. And we looked at the status and the status of the threat class for each. So the status in terms of abundance, it was compared to what historic or what we're trying to achieve, in terms of getting to the recovery goal. And then we took a look at the various threats that I was just mentioning there. Yeah, there's each one of these systems, and we can even drill down deeper if we in detail into each of these systems, but each one of these systems has different problems going on. Union's got some freshwater habitat that's problematic. It's what we call low negative there. Estuarine habitat though in Union's pretty good. Fishery exploitation, this is about harvests for summer chum. When these critters were listed, that exploitation rate or harvest rate was over 60, 70%. It is now down below 10%. That's kudos to the tribes and other harvest regimes and harvest groups out there. They were able to cut back. Now, summer chum benefited from cutbacks on other salmoniid species that were also being protected because they intermingle or they catch them indirect that way. But this obviously helped get summer chum on that good trajectory there. Predation, we're still taking a hard look at that. Seals can be a problem in Hood Canal. Sometimes the transient killer whales come in and take care of that problem for a while, but certainly, this still is an issue that we need to look at. Now, regulatory too is we're also taking a look at, provided that with a 1 right now, a low positive. What I believe we're doing is we're dealing with the sins, if you will, of the past. A lot of the regulations on the books now are good, but they weren't here soon enough, if you will. And so a lot of development happened before the current regulations, and there's been exemptions and variances and other things that have been grandfathered in, et cetera, that way. So that, as Rebecca mentioned earlier, we're going to be using what we call a landscape assessment prioritization tool to take a look at what is happening on the land that can help us get a better handle and understanding about what we should do in terms of the action to address that outstanding issue. The way I see that from a very coarse high level is the LAP tool, or the landscape assessment prioritization tool, as we call it, the LAP tool, we can show, it's a mapping tool primarily. It's to help facilitate the discussions about what to do and maybe what not to do. So I was hoping what we can do with that LAP tool is we can lay out, here's the various kinds of habitat areas and kinds of habitat that is needed for summer chum areas, overlay that with how the land is managed. We have a lot of information from zoning, regulatory programs, land cover, temperature, the list can go on there. And we're hoping then, hey, maybe we're okay in some places, or maybe no, that something's got to change, something's got to happen. And like I said, I'm hoping that while using that lab tool combined with the information we have about the status of threats or issues assessment can help facilitate those conversations with the right group of people to figure out what to do and or what not to do, of course. So that's kind of the gist of where we're at with that right now. That concludes at the moment here my discussion, my conversation here with you about that. But yeah, any questions or other input and dialogue?
Thank you, Scott. And I welcome folks to use the raise hand function on the reactions to ask a question and chime in if they'd like, or you can put your question in the chat. And while we're waiting for people to maybe come up with their questions, I've got one for you, Scott.
Sure.
Just sort of for if there's any folks on the call who are interested in doing something like this in their watershed, what are the lessons or best practices that you learned throughout the way? And like, what do you wish that you had known when you'd started that now you know in terms of this process?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I wish we had known is just more of an update about what's going on, and we were able to pull that together. I think that's a major lesson learned that I like. It'd be great if the rest of Puget Sound could do similar, but gather that information, get to know your stocks of concerns of issues of what's going on. And recognize, look, even these recovery plans, they're what, 15 plus years old right now. We've learned a lot in that meantime. So I think the idea is to pull that together to get that better handle then of what's still outstanding, what's impacting. And I think too, don't have any fear about prioritizing. You know, people, it's not an easy one. You have to have the hard discussions though, because a lot of people won't, you know, everyone's got their own favorite or want to go or what to look at, but we're trying to look at this, what's needed, you know, from the eye of the fish for one, and what's needed for summer chum to recover. Now, is it going to be compatible with development or not? Not always, but let's make that informed decision about, you know, what is it that we're just going to accept to give up, allow development to happen, and what is it that we're going to want to protect and restore. And you have to think about things like, you know, your economies. The Hood Canal economies are very much natural resource based, shellfish, fishing, forest, etc. that way. So I think you have to be willingness to have those discussions. But I think information is extremely helpful, and an analysis and understanding of what do you know about it and what you don't know, accept the uncertainties too. So that's kind of in a nutshell, but yeah, I'd like to answer that.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I've got a question in the chat here. It looks like it's kind of a 2-for-1. So the first is, was the Canadian sockeye fishery considered in your harvest issue? And then the second question is, are the impacts of the 14 to 16 ocean conditions considered in your abundance estimates?
The short answer, Alan, is yes and yes. Certainly for the sockeye fishery, Canadian, yeah, because that certainly changed over time to have less of an impact on summer chum in the Strait of Fuca primarily, and up through fish returning primarily into the Fraser and that. Yeah, the impacts of ocean conditions. Yeah, we did take. I don't know if I don't want to answer this, Alan. I'm not sure if I want to say all 14 or 16 of them, but certainly ocean conditions came into play about how we're looking at abundance estimates. And we did that by looking at, there seems to be quite a good relationship between the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which is the big climate shifts that happen, you know, every decade or so, and summer chum. So when the PDO is cold, summer chum do well. When it's warm, they don't do as well. So we get an understanding of yeah, how does that affect abundance? Certainly abundance in that regard. I hope that answers you, Alan, what you're looking at, yeah, or asking about.
Okay, we've got another question here in the chat about stock prioritization. Don't you want to be focusing on ailing? And I think that is, oh boy, less than 4 populations to achieve ESA recovery.
Yeah, well, there's a combination in there. You'll need those graphs I showed. Yeah, the slides I showed you, too small to read in that. But the fours do both what's ailing and also amount of information we know. And I skimmed over a lot of that. So I'm going to suggest that we are looking at the ones that are ailing, or what ailing, but what is it about those that are ailing? Yeah, and where is it outstanding there? Yeah, this just helped us. Well, it helped us with prioritizing what to focus on, because it took into account that you need. Yes, there are many subpopulations, but you need certain ones to keep chugging along and doing well and maintain, because they provide that stability there, where other smaller ones may blink in and out, if you will. So that's my kind of quick answer there. I'd be happy though to talk some more detail, and yeah, and I can suggest where you might want to dive into that a little bit more, read a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Scott. I'm not seeing any other questions pop up, and I just want to confirm with Elizabeth that I should be able to see hands up, right? Okay.
You're on mute, Elizabeth. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm so used to being not muted. You should be able to see hands, and I haven't noticed any.
Okay, thank you. We had a last minute switch on host role. So we've got another question. First, a kudo, nice presentation and very informative. And then a follow-up. So you've defined source versus sink populations then.
Yeah, we didn't quite use those terms, but yes, the source population for the Strait is the Snow Salmon Creek. I'm not saying though we don't need the Jimmy Come Lately or Chimicum or Dungeness. Those, you know, but if we lose snow salmon, we probably will lose the Strait population. And then in Hood Canal, it's likely Quilcene and probably the Union. Those are the ones that are two extremely important. We got a huge benefit in Skokomish. Skokomish summer chum were extirpated. We really didn't plan to do much in Skokomish, but like I kind of mentioned with Dungeness earlier, they did a lot of work in the Skokomish system for Chinook in there, and especially in the estuary, the lower sections of the Skokomish system, and we're seeing now robust populations that naturally reintroduced summer chum that are probably strayed there, or there may have been some remnants, you know, of way back when that are just thriving now and doing well. But I think a lot of it was likely being reintroduced probably from Union fish, headed, you know, fish coming down headed that way, etc. Does that help there? Is it Robert? Yeah, I hope that helps answer your question there.
All right, Scott, I've not seen the other. Oh, no, one more question in the chat. Are the summer chum populations genetically distinct?
The Strait and Hood Canal are, yes, and Hood Canal, straight on to Fuca summer chum are genetically distinct from other summer chum. In fact, it's the most southern range of summer run chum. There's quite a few up in Alaska and that way, yeah.
Okay, so Scott, I've got another question for you. Just with this process, were there any surprises, especially when you like sorted out your prioritized species? Were you surprised that there were, like, for instance, mostly chum or anything like that?
Yeah, I guess one surprise was this connection, if you will, you know, with the Pacific Decadal Oscillation or the climate in there, and how is what we think what's happening out in the big ocean. It drives in. It does something good and bad, depending whether it's cool PDO or warm, but good and bad for the food web inside Hood Canal. And then that's feeding, we likely think it's probably feeding then into the various, subpopulations in that way. And so that was a pleasant surprise. I mean, not that we, like we can go out and do a whole lot about PDO, but it gives us a good understanding of, when, how these, well, yeah, the dynamics and of how the populations respond, to food sources and that kind of thing. We probably some surprise up in the quill scene. There's been tons of work there, but I think we need to think harder about what exactly needs to be happening up in the quill scene watershed. Right now, it's doing well. It was there was a supplementation program in the quill scene. There's a quill scene National Fish Hatchery that, for 12 years running had the supplementation going off, then cut off. Now we're seeing that population maintain pretty well, but we're just a little perplexed because we think it should have more habitat than it has, and yet they're doing well. I think that maybe is a good surprise or a good thing, but that's something we'd like to understand, have a little bit better understanding of there. I guess the other surprise I mentioned was the Skokomish. Didn't expect them to get reintroduced and become as robust as they are at the moment. That was another pleasant surprise in that way. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And we've got another chat here question. How will you start implementing these results in the Hood Canal Coordinating Council's everyday work?
Yeah, well, Teresa, thanks for that. The way we're going to do it, this will really help get us focused about where to put time and energy in projects. I mean, I think, maybe before we did all this, the Duckabush was a very good an example. We knew, I don't know if you all know what's happening there, but if you help out that estuary and lower river by, spanning the highway a little bit more, you're definitely going to benefit summer chum. We're hoping it can benefit Chinook and those systems as well. But I think it's things like that will help us to focus which actions to be focused on, and then which projects. And we want to get very specific. Right now we're using what's called a call for projects in our lead entity process. We're outlining the details. For example, we need a project here, this kind of project there. We're going to be able to get a lot more specific about what it is that's needed and where exactly it's needed based on this kind of information.
That's great. Thank you, Scott. Any other questions? We still have some time. And if there are any other questions, I guess we can give you back the rest of the hour. Or anything else that you want to share?
Just one other thing I thought about that it's kind of a follow-up to Teresa's question there about the everyday work. We've been talking with NOAA Fisheries about hey, recovery, delisting, what does that look like? And they really can't answer that at the moment because it hasn't happened. And it was tried with Oregon Coastal Coho, and it didn't come about. So maybe there's some lessons learned there, but we're trying to understand what is it that you need, and we believe it's really like we need to update the recovery plan. I'm almost thinking it's like, let's just say these things were listed today, what would that new plan look like? And this kind of information that we gather is going to help pinpoint. I mean, we knew back then 15 years ago or more, we had certain situations in each of the watershed limiting factors analyses that happened, it was called at the time, that help us get a little bit focused there. And I think a lot of good habitat restoration and protection kind of work ensued. But this will get us even, a more detailed, a more focused recovery plan, and then a call for actions, call for projects put out there.
That's great. And that's really exciting. And it's good to see how this work and kind of push our salmon recovery and Puget Sound recovery work forward. Yeah, so I'm going to do, I guess, a last call for questions. And if I don't see anything pop up or any hand wave, we're going to close it out. Okay, we got some thank yous. Scott, thank you so much for this presentation and for all that work. It's really great and really interesting. And I'm really excited to see how it'll move on.
No, I am too, Rebecca. Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I think it's pretty exciting what's happening, I believe, with Summer Chum. I think at least in my lifetime, there's a unique opportunity to see, something listed on ESA, maybe get off that list and see recovered. But then, then I think it's that new job is to keep them recovered, and that this will not end. This is recoveries forever is what I like to say. So that's what I'm hoping goes there. So thank you. Thank everyone too for joining in this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your Monday. And Elizabeth, you can stop recording. All right. And